Revised numbers show the US job market was much weaker and on shaky ground than when President Trump launched his trade war. The US economy added only 911,000 fewer jobs than first thought during the year ending in March. It's 71,000 a month, which is incredibly weak. Overall, this revision is the largest on record and proof for the White House that the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is broken. Dan Altman is the author of the High Yield Economics newsletter. Dan's with me from New York. I want to go through this in two different aspects, Dan, because it is complex. Let's first of all deal with the economics of it, not the BLS side of it. This is obviously now, this is grist to the mill for an interest rate cut, and arguably it could be for a 50 basis point cut, not 25 basis. But does this not justify Donald Trump's point that Powell should have cut sooner? He should have been better aware of this weakness.
I'm not sure it does, Richard, because the unemployment rate still hasn't risen very much. And the reason is that labor supply growth has dwindled just as labor demand growth has dwindled. What we saw starting in mid-2024 was a marked decline in work permits and asylum given to immigrants. We were at a rate of 250,000 a month in December 2023, and that came down to about 8,000 early this year. So there just wasn't as much labor supply coming online. And as a result, even though labor demand was cooling, we still have a fairly low unemployment rate. And Powell's job is to maximize employment for the people who are actually in the United States. His job is not to maximize labor demand and send wages shooting through the roof.
But when you look at these numbers, and I understand what you're saying, that the weakness comes from, in a sense, the weakness comes from the very policies that the president is now saying needs to be reinforced. But at the same time, we do know that demand is, the consumer demand is falling, that the economy is slowing, and that the argument for interest rate cuts is now pretty much inarguable.
Well, I agree that the economy is slowing. I think labor supply is an important part of that picture. And I do think that the Fed will cut by 25 basis points this month, but I think it will do so partly as a trial balloon, because I think it wants to see how the economy will react to that loosening of credit. If there's not much change in inflation in the next couple of months, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of overheating, then they may continue. But I think they're operating in territory here that's not very well known to them.
So let's do the other side, the BLS side. Now, every economist knows that the numbers are dodgy to start with. And by that, I don't mean they're fiddled. They're just very difficult. They're very complicated. They're very, very technical and fiddly to get right. So a revision is not unusual, even a large revision. Does this give, what you've seen today, does this give cause for concern about the integrity, not the process?
I don't have any concerns about the integrity under the civil servants who work for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm sure that they're doing the best they can. They have a system of statistical estimates which may need updating for this unusual situation of falling labor supply, which was a result of policies that they would not normally take into account directly when forming their estimates. That's something that ought to be looked at. But I have no doubt of the integrity of the people who have been doing this job for years in exactly the same way.
Is there a way to improve the numbers?
Well, some people have said, why don't you just count everybody instead of doing statistical estimates based on a sample? That's essentially what these revisions come from. And as you can see, we have to wait about 6 months for that count to complete. So it would take a lot more funding and a lot more effort to make that happen. Unfortunately, the BLS is now getting less funding.
And finally, Stephen Mirren, of course, who's been put forward for a Fed for the to fill an unexpired post on the Fed. He believes, well, they're so dodgy, these numbers, let's not bother even issuing them at all. I'm guessing you don't subscribe to that view.
Well, I know that a lot of businesses, when making decisions, want to understand the employment picture and consumer demand as close to real time as they can. Now, you can ask them, would they rather have a statistical estimate which is unbiased but perhaps noisy and have it a month after the data are available, or would they rather wait 6 or 7 months for something that's a bit more accurate? I think some of them would say they'd still rather have the noisy estimate sooner.
I think that's a lovely way of putting it. Noisy estimate. It describes exactly what we're talking about. I'm very grateful, Dan. Thank you. Joining us. Thank you.